Thank you all for being here. I do appreciate it. Some have come far and wide, some are local, but you've made the effort, and we really do appreciate it. This is the sixth IP Awareness Summit. It's the first one in Boston, and we are thankful to the Center for Research Innovation at Northeastern for co-hosting this with us. They were great supporters, and we do appreciate their cooperation and confidence in us. So we have a really good series of panels today and an excellent keynote, Kara Miller. And let me just read a few welcoming remarks. Well, first, good morning. I've already given you the good morning, but welcome to the Intellectual Property Awareness Summit. I'm Bruce Berman. I'm chairman and co-founder of CIPU. This is the sixth summit, the first in Boston, which we've already said. And there are people here today in person. We should have a full room eventually. We're getting there. And there are people on the live stream. So in total, we have about 125 people today. People are attending from throughout the US, as well as from the UK, India, the Philippines, Sweden, Germany, Argentina, and Hong Kong. So it's a pretty diverse group. Interest in IP rights is exploding. Generative AI, gene editing, green tech, music streaming, the innovation race with China are among the many developments that have put IP in the spotlight. But more creation and easy duplication mean less IP certainty and more theft. The relationship between IP and IP rights is not well understood, nor is IP value. That brings us to the IP Awareness Summit. Most of us are here today as owners, creators, and legal advisors, and a number as educators and students. Clarity about IP, what it is and what it is not, and what it affects, has never been more important. Executives and entrepreneurs are not the only audiences that need to know how the IP system operates. The people here today and others have a responsibility to help provide context and guidance. It's not just a matter of preaching to the IP choir. The message needs to reach new, younger, and more diverse audiences, and we need to seek more effective ways to convey it. Sharing creator success stories helps. So do positive IP narratives. Simplifying the message is among our greatest challenges. We need to assure a range of audiences that IP rights are for building bridges, not erecting barricades. I would like to thank CIPU's co-host for today, CRI, and for their confidence. And also our funding and strategic partners should be mentioned, especially the Lemelson MIT program, Astellas Pharma, the Michelson Institute for Intellectual Property, POPS Licensing, Allied Security Trust, and the Kellogg School of Management, among others. A big shout out to CIPU's board of directors and committee members, several of whom are here today. The program, you should have received a hard copy of the program, either on your seat or at the registration table. It's also on our website, ipawarenesssummit.com. You'll also find speaker biographies there, which you might find useful. We're pleased to note today that 5 National Academy of Inventors, NAI, members are speaking or introducing today. We didn't set out to do that. It just sort of worked out that way, and it's sort of nice that that level of interest is there on the part of NAI. Lunch is 12:45. The program resumes promptly at 1:30, so please don't go too far. Time has been allotted for networking and discussion and digestion. Please use it. There will be a networking coffee break at 3:30 and a return for the finale at 4. The last panel, Entrepreneurship and Diversity, will be followed by a cocktail reception and a drawing for 3 all-season CIPU vests. Add your name at the registration table if you have not, and you may be a lucky winner. I'd like to bring Jen Boyle up from the Executive Director of CRI to say a few words of welcome. Jen?
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody to IPAS 2023. This is my first experience with IPAS, and we are thrilled to be able to partner with the Center for Intellectual Property Understanding on this vital topic of intellectual property rights. Thank you to everyone who is attending in person and everybody that is, all of our virtual attendees for taking time today, and welcome to Northeastern's Boston campus. I'd like to talk just a minute about what CRI does here, the Center for Research Innovation. The team at CRI works with the Northeastern innovation community to translate research into meaningful global impact through commercialization. Our team evaluates invention disclosures, we patent cutting-edge technologies, and license IP rights to industry and university spinouts. We run a number of programs that aim to educate on IP, accelerate the advancement of technology, deepen industry engagement, and support ventures on their path to commercialization impact. IP is the foundation of the work that we do here, and it's key to our success. Without a robust patent portfolio, we wouldn't be able to commercialize the technology. I'm excited to share, as Bruce mentioned, about NAI. I'm excited to share that just last week we learned that Northeastern was recognized for the 8th straight year in the 2022 National Academy of Inventors Top 100 Worldwide Universities Granted U.S. Utility Patents. I always have to read that because it's a very long name. IP provides us with the ability to transform people's lives through technology. I look forward to learning more today about the current landscape from the speakers here, and I'm glad so many of you are able to attend this powerful event. By sharing our experiences, we will be better able to convey the purpose and impact of IP rights. I hope the discussions today inspire innovative ideas and foster long-lasting collaborations going forward. Thank you again for joining. I'll turn it back to Bruce.
So I'm going to introduce the introducer. I'd like to welcome Dr. Michael Sema, who will introduce today's keynote, Kara Miller. Dr. Sema is Professor of Materials Science and Engineering at MIT Koch Institute for Integrative Cancer Research and a member of the National Academy of Inventors. He is a faculty director of the Lemelson MIT program, which supports IP education for students. Dr. Sema?
All right, thank you. I'm going to be very brief because Kara doesn't really need a huge introduction because most of us know her. I serve on a lot of committees over the years. I've been here 37 years that are focused on, okay, what's so special about Boston as an innovation, a place of innovation? And most of those committees come to the conclusion that it's our culture that transformed a place that was largely manufacturing to a place that the principal thing being made is ideas. And an important part of that culture are people that help us curate it. And Kara Miller is such a person. Currently, she writes the Big Idea column for the Boston Globe. And, but most of us, for many years, organized our commutes around her radio show, Innovation Hub. It was always very spectacular and very thought-provoking. So Kara's, we've crossed paths several times. Most recently, she's on the advisory committee of the Lemelson Foundation, but of course, she's part of the Boston landscape. Kara, please.
Thank you, Michael. That's so nice. I should probably just stop now and I'll be ahead. But thanks to Bruce for having me. Thanks to Stephanie, of course, for inviting me, and also to the many people, some of them in this room, who sat down and talked to me in advance of this talk. So what I want to talk to you about today is a divide. And it's a divide in the concept of owning and profiting off your own ideas. And you probably already have some sense of this divide. Bruce alluded to it a little bit. But I want to illuminate it for you a little more and maybe anchor it a little more just with some kind of simple stories. So let's start with one of those stories. So just imagine this divide as like a physical thing, like a chasm in the ground. And on one side, there's people on both sides. On one side is a guy you know well, or you know of well, Thomas Edison. And on the other side is another inventor. I'm pretty sure you know less well, Catherine Gin. She's the chief technology officer of a company called Keynote, which she co-founded. So there they are on either side of the chasm. Catherine Gin heard about Thomas Edison pretty early in life. She was in the 4th grade. And her teacher said, I want you to do a project, and it's going to come out of the fact that, Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. So I want you all to go invent something. At the time, Catherine's mom had just had a baby, and she was often assigned to sort of position herself right next to the stroller and feed the baby with a bottle, which she thought was a boring and annoying job. And so she thought, what I'll do is create an automatically dispensing baby bottle. This was her 4th grade project, and then all the parents would come in and see these projects. There she is with the fake baby. What could go wrong here? Wouldn't you give this to your baby? She used a hollowed out desk lamp, like the kind that you clamp on, and screwed out that light bulb and put in a baby bottle. And so there she is on presentation day. But for Catherine, that was really just the beginning. She kept on inventing. And about a decade later, she found herself in the big league. She was in college. She helped invent a product called Highlight. You can see it there. That makes disinfectants blue for just a few minutes. So if you imagine yourself in sort of the setting of, let's say, a hospital, and you're disinfecting an area, it's hard when that disinfectant is clear to know if you've gone over the same part twice, but the adjacent part not at all, because you can't see it. So the idea here is this will turn the area blue for a few minutes, so you can be sure, yes, I've disinfected this whole part, but then it will eventually fade away. She won a 2016 Lemelson MIT Student Prize, along with her 2 co-inventors. She met with lawyers at Columbia, as I said, where she was an undergraduate. They were all undergraduates, and they thought she should turn over her IP. Now, at this point, so Catherine's in college. She's done a lot of STEM. She's read a lot of papers. She knows how to read a paper. Never encountered patents. Knows nothing about them. How would you look at one? How would you read? How would you create? Nothing. Doesn't know anything. And so, when I talked to her about this road that she had of trying to navigate the IP landscape when she had no knowledge and, pretty importantly, no money to do it with, she thought of that kind of terrible situation, and she thought back to the chasm that I talked about between her and Thomas Edison. And she said to me, in what I think was a sort of really smart insight, she said, why do we still talk about Thomas Edison today? There are so many inventors in the history of the world. In fact, there are so many inventors in the history of the US, if you just want to limit it. But she said, why do we talk about him? Thomas Edison distinguished himself not only because he was an inventor, he was a marketer, and he patented everything. And Catherine wishes, when she was back doing that baby bottle thing, when she was back studying Thomas Edison, that somebody had maybe mentioned to her about patents. Because she said, when you go to an elementary school like she went to, which was mostly low income, mostly non-white kids, everybody is looking to figure out how you lift up your family, how you get the next generation to do better. And most kids do not think of invention as a way that you could potentially do that. And beyond that, they don't realize that patents are not just things that are the domain of pharma companies. They're not just the domain that are of computer manufacturers. They do not have to be incredibly technical, describing things that are incredibly technical or incredibly fancy. And of course, there are other dimensions to intellectual property, none of which are talked about. And Catherine said to me, she worries that because there's so little education about patents, about trademarks, about copyright, that there's a particular impact on women and women of color. And what's interesting is when you start to dig into the data, sort of beneath that comment, you realize the numbers back her up. So if you go back to 2019, not that long ago, just under 13% of inventors who were getting patents were women. In a country that's 50-50, when you're under 13%, it's not that good. But the ability of women to attract capital is even worse. So this is 2022. Male-only companies are in yellow. You see that piece of the pie here. The female-only companies are in blue. Look carefully. And if a woman has a man on her team, then it's the red part. So that's a mixed gender team. But 2%, even in 2022, PitchBook reported that hit for them a 6-year low in terms of percentage of venture capital that female-founded companies were getting. The Economist, so there's, you think about that chasm that I talked about. Here's another instance of the chasm. I mean, that's a chasm, right? The economist Raj Chetty, who's now here at Harvard, has noted another element to the chasm is money. Money matters a lot. As a parent's income rises, the likelihood that their kid is going to get a patent also rises. So if your children are if the parents rather are in the top 1% of income earners, you're 10 times more likely to become an inventor than people whose parents earn under the median income, not the poorest, just under the median income. Now, there's obviously a lot of factors that play into that kind of gap. We could all brainstorm what some of them are, but I would argue that one of them is one that may somewhat fly under the radar, and it's community knowledge. What knowledge does your community have about both the fact that there's a certain power to generating ideas, and that those ideas further can generate wealth for you? And I'll offer a fascinating side note, which is that Chetty found. Knowledge is key, not just when it comes to how much your family makes. It also applies to the areas of life that you know about. So I'm just going to read you a quote from Chetty. Children who grow up in areas with more inventors and are thereby exposed to more innovation growing up are much more likely to become inventors themselves. Exposure influences not just whether a child grows up to be an inventor, but also the type of invention he or she produces. And this is kind of a little neat part of the study. For example, among people living in Boston, only people living in Boston, those who grew up in Silicon Valley are especially likely to patent in computers. Those who grew up in Minneapolis, where many medical device manufacturers are especially likely to patent in medical devices. Similarly, children whose parents hold patents in a certain technology class, amplifiers, for example, are more likely to patent in exactly that field rather than in closely related fields like antennas. So to me, that's fascinating because it goes back to Catherine Jin's point about the importance of childhood. So, like I said, he was only looking at this pool of people living in Boston, but even in that pool of people who you would think have a lot in common, it turns out that what they were exposed to in childhood in some ways changes for them what feels like it's on the menu of life, right? Like they still remember the importance of computers, the importance of medical devices, and that remains with them. Michael Seymour, who you just heard from, who is also a member of the National Academy of Inventors as well as a professor of engineering at MIT, has argued that underrepresented groups can be held back because of lack of ownership. And really, as a community, that's something we need to change. And I should note that Raj Chetty, the economist who I cited, also finds there is a racial gap. White kids are about 3 times as likely to become inventors as black children. So we continue to see these kind of chasms, as I described, these different ways that separate people. Let's come back to Catherine Jin for a second. Today she runs a company, helps run a company. It's built around the product that I showed you, Highlight, that blue additive to bleach. She does have a patent portfolio. The question is, how did she get there? So when she first needed to understand how patents worked, and that was at Columbia, right, there was this kind of squeeze. They had created something, they were getting attention, some kind of protection needed to be put around it. She didn't know what she was doing, so she was getting advice from family and friends, and they could only afford attorneys who her team had like a personal connection to, like a friend of a friend, not the people who were actually the right fit. And I would say she spent a lot of money subsequently fixing up that patent portfolio with people who were the right fit. As I mentioned, she felt under pressure to give away her IP, and she later heard horror stories from students who that's exactly what they did. They just gave things away because they didn't know what they were doing. And so, you know, back to that chasm, right, that divide between the young Catherine Gin and Thomas Edison is just too big. And in some ways, young people are the perfect people to talk to because they understand deeply the power of videos, of tech startups, of music, of fashion, of the kinds of things that require some sort of protection. But the system that does protect those people is so rarely discussed. And the money that could flow to those people often never does. I'm going to tell you an alternate story here. An IP lawyer here in Boston, Cynthia Gilbert, who's here today, has worked with a couple of different kids on patents. One is named Max. There he is. He created a ceramic mug called the Mug with a Hoop. It has a little basketball hoop on the rim of the mug. Now, he's done a lot of different sports, started with basketball, but now it has other sports. And you can like shoot pieces of cereal or pasta or whatever you're eating through it. As a kid, Max was diagnosed with dyslexia. His family worried a lot about his future. In the second grade, he made this mug with a hoop. And his father, at some point, after he started getting some attention, said, I think we should see a lawyer to protect this idea. His mother said to me, this, of course, was a key moment in their business. Max, who's headed off to college in the fall, has now done about $4 million in sales. He's donated more than $80,000 to dyslexia charities. He's also sued hundreds of counterfeiters based on trademark and copyright and patent protection that he has. And I'm just going to read a quote from Max. While dyslexia can make learning in school hard, it is also a gift that got me to think of putting a basketball hoop on a mug. All kids who think and learn, imagine all the great ideas our world will have when all kids who think and learn differently are understood. Now, this mug obviously was a breakthrough product. It opened doors for him. You can get it at Amazon if you're in the market for a mug with a hoop. He has a licensing deal with Walmart. And you know, one of the things is, Cynthia said to me, that his parents knew what to do with their children's creation. It was his father who said, let's go see a lawyer. And his mom said to me, I just don't think most kids and most parents would even think to protect their idea. What's interesting, as I've talked to inventors, as I've talked to folks at universities, to lawyers, they all agreed that kids should be more exposed to the concept of idea ownership. Many people thought it should be high school, some people thought it should be college. Only Catherine, who I mentioned at the beginning, she mentioned to me the 4th grade. But I actually think that suggestion of the 4th grade is worth reflecting on because it underscores how important it is that people who don't have any kind of special access, don't have like a neighbor who's an IP lawyer, can learn how inventions might change their lives. And I think at its core, how simply some of these ideas in IP can be presented. When I was talking to Cynthia, we were at Tate. If you hang out in the Boston area, I think in the DC area too, Tates are everywhere now. And you know, she picked up this paper coffee cup in front of her and she pointed to the language and the designs on it. And she was like, this is a copyright and this is probably trademarked. And then we got talking about the coffee sleeve, right? And she was like, oh no, this is not like the Starbucks sleeve, because she's looking inside and she's like, this is not like the Starbucks sleeve because that is patented. And you know, this, to diffuse the heat in there, I think that the Starbucks sleeve is a step up. You can do your own analysis later on. But there we had it, right? Trademark, copyright, patent for the price of a cup of coffee. Even if it's a slightly overpriced cup of coffee, it's still pretty reasonable. You know, she said at the end of the conversation, our cups were getting tossed in the trash, that IP protection can be life-changing. And she worried, we're wasting so many brains. Michael told me that not only have most young people that he visits in schools not considered the idea of patent protection, IP protection, but he wasn't sure most teachers have considered it either. I think there is, of course, this underlying concern. I heard it from a lot of people that there's an increasing stigma attached to patents, that, maybe, as I said, only large companies get them. Maybe it means you'll be involved in a lawsuit. And I think that folks in the IP world worry that that chasm I talked before is actually growing between sort of regular people and people in the know on IP, and it's not shrinking. So the question is, what do we do? Almost everybody I talked to came back to this idea that storytelling is key. So I'm going to close with a final story. I talked before about that baby bottle that Catherine designed, which would automatically dispense milk. So in the early 2000s, some brand new parents, their names were Jim and Farrah Sheikh, they also felt like they needed to come up with a new baby bottle. The mom was an attorney, the dad was an engineer, he had worked at BMW, and as the mom would later remember it, their invention started about 3 or 4 in the morning. They had a particularly fussy baby, and the dad had to go downstairs, the milk was cold, and warm it up. But he was so tired at 3 or 4 in the morning, no surprise, he overwarmed the milk. It was now too hot to give to the baby, had to start recooling it. And then he overcooled the milk, and his wife said, "You're an engineer, can't you do something about this? Can't you fix it?" He did ultimately fix it. Oh, sorry, this is the patent for the coffee sleeve. He did fix it. He created a bottle called the Yumi. It warms up milk in 60 seconds to exactly the right temperature. It uses a phase change material. And what I would say is it's critical that we expand the number of people who hear these kinds of stories, who put their hands on the Yumi baby bottle, who, check out the coffee sleeve, which, by the way, may have been invented, although there's a lot of patents on coffee sleeves, when a dad in Oregon was driving his daughter to school and coffee spilled all over his lap because it was too hot, so invented the coffee sleeve. He got his patent in 1995. But I think spreading these stories will help strengthen the idea of what intellectual property is. And we have to, in parallel, strengthen and create partnerships between businesses and educators and nonprofits and the legal community, because it's IP experts, it's owners of IP, it's people like the people in this room who I think have the ability to change things and the knowledge to disseminate out. Because there's no question about it. So many people said this to me. Max's mom said this to me. She said if Max had been a different kid in a different situation, that idea would have just been left on the table. But we are leaving brilliant minds on the table. We are leaving inventions uncreated. We are leaving ideas unprotected. And I think probably most importantly, we're ignoring a road to empowerment, financial, but also emotional empowerment, feeling like you own something and that you've done something for yourself and your family. And I would say, Bruce mentioned a little bit about AI. This call to action comes at a crucial time because technology is changing really rapidly and computing is improving, but it's creativity. It's that ability to understand a need, to sense at 3 or 4 in the morning, there's a problem here, we should try to fix it and go out and make a baby bottle. That is what separates us. I mean, so far we have not gotten to the AI who will sense that and go out and make you a baby bottle. And so that's why I hope you kind of take away this one thought, which is invention can be life-changing. We need to teach kids that their ideas can be profitable and that their ideas can be theirs. Thank you very much. And Bruce, should we take questions? Do you want to go to the next thing? If you have a couple of questions, I'm happy to try to take them or direct you to the person in the room who can take them. We have a quiet and withdrawn audience. Okay.
Wonderful presentation.
Oh, thanks.
I enjoyed it. In my experience studying the invention education space, there is a reluctance to talk about money when it comes to intellectual property and profitability. The idea that it's not only valuable to invent and have ideas, but also to make money from them. Have you encountered this reluctance in your research as well, or do you have any ideas about how
Sure. So the question is that that invention education often sort of wants to sidestep, right, this idea of making money. Like inventing is sort of good and pure, and we bring in the stream of like, but should we really teach people about profiting off of it? I mean, I would say, maybe Stephanie and the audience, I might turn this over to you in a sec. But I guess I would say, I think you have to, every kid knows that they are headed towards some kind of career. And I think you have to acknowledge that, and to not acknowledge that sort of ignores reality, which happens all the time. I mean, I have a doctorate in English, and I remember lots of heated discussions about this question when I was in grad school about, should we talk to people about the fact that there's like not very many positions as professors, or just like pretend no, and we'll just train everybody to be a professor and just hope that, something magical will happen, right? And I think hoping that people will magically figure out the patent system is not good. And it really, people like Catherine, June, like Max, they got lucky. Either they got lucky because they had a parent, or they got lucky because they had a friend of a friend. And do you know how many kids don't get lucky? And I think that seems like the real thing to lose versus like talking about money, which, Stephanie, do you have a thought? And Michael has a thought too.
Yes, so we've talked a lot about starting the education early, which I believe in, and part of that has to be that in addition to teaching about either the college and career path or the career technical education path, that there is this third path. So that would be important to get that shift to happen for teachers, this third path to prosperity. But the fact is, in today's world, roughly 90% plus of those who are earning patents have at least a BA degree. And so patenting is associated with having the degree, but nothing requires that. And so if we want to teach this as a third path, we really need to create some proof of concepts and show how that comes into being and how communities come together to support that happening. And I think we can.
Michael, let's see. Hold on one second, Mike is coming to you.
To the question about, is the profitability angle a turnoff? And I usually point students and teachers to the idea that, look, your patent is addressing an unmet need. If that solution to that is going to be developed, you have to raise capital. And the only way to do that is to have intellectual property protection. So if you're passionate about the solution, sure, profitability could be important to that, but actually creating the solution will depend on owning the intellectual property. So it's a completely different angle, and I think it's one that resonates with a lot of students.
Thanks, Bruce. Back to you. Thanks.